Welcome to Seat at the Table. Look, this is, as you guys know, this is a platform where we could talk about issues that are pertinent in our community and how we could talk about bringing solutions to it. This particular topic is a little bit different than what we talked ever before. We've spent a lot of time talking about, fathers and mothers, but I want to dig into an area because I think it's a necessity in this conversation, and that's the whole concept of the African diaspora. And the relationship and the synergies between the African American community and the African community. So let me start here, and I want to hear everybody kind of respond to this. And that first question is, when we think of our history, what comes to mind? And let's go this way. And I want to hear from Erika. So Moses, I'll start with you.
Yeah, thank you so much, and thank you everyone that will be here today. My name is Moses, and it's my first time being here. When my brother reached out, I was actually excited. But then once we got talking, I was like, my goodness, I don't know what I'm getting myself into. But be that as may. So when I think about my history is actually a little confusing in that I've spent half of my life in this country and half of my life in Africa. Half of it completely. And so I look at two different lenses. The first one is my experiences here and my experiences back home in Africa. And when I talk about back home, that actually betrays a lot of my thinking, because why is back home Africa and you've only lived there for half your life? Why can't back home be here where you've lived the other half? It just betrays my bias. But I see the importance of learning our history, the importance of actually going with not what we've been taught, but what we've discovered through lived experiences and through studying. Yeah.
What do you think, Erika?
So I guess that's my turn. So when I think about my history, the first thing I think about is the misconception of history as it pertains to the education system. What I was taught, as I got further along and was able to learn things on my own, I realized that there was so much misinformation. That's on the one hand. And then on the other hand, I think of my Caribbean background. I can identify more as a Jamaican American, although I wasn't born in Jamaica, but I was raised by a Jamaican. Yeah. So I really attach a lot of my history to my mother, and actually her history as a Jamaican immigrant that came into this country all on her own, raised her children all on her own, and really lived the American dream, so to speak. She went to college, raised 3 children, she bought a home, what everybody aspires to do who comes into this country. So for me, my history is broad in a sense that, yes, I am American, but I identify less as an American and more as a Caribbean American.
Interesting.
So I think that for me, it's complicated, because when your parents immigrate into this country from Africa, and then you're the first generation that's born and raised here, you spend the culture inside the house is all African, Kenyan, and Ugandan in my scenario, and then outside the house is African American. And in the school system, we're not really taught actually a fair shot at either of those. Yeah. It's in the house that we learn about colonialism and the effects that had on African culture. It's in the house we learn about really what happened during slavery. We really learn about actually all of the complicated aspects of both. So I think as far as history is concerned, my perspective of it is actually very sympathetic towards both. I managed to mentally strike a healthy balance, because I realized that both units actually depend on each other very much. When you look at Dr. King's struggle here, then you look at Mandela's struggle there. When you look at how everyone, the scramble for Africa over there, when you look at everything happening with systemic racism here, you realize, a lot of the shared experiences really aren't so separate and unique from each other when you really take a step back. So I've grown to appreciate both, but that's probably because of a lot of self-education and not necessarily, as it was mentioned earlier, based on the education system, which inevitably seems to fail specifically students of color and all of our backgrounds.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, I think I'll take a little bit of a different approach to the question, but to kind of piggyback off what you're saying, when I think of history, I immediately think of struggle. I think of sadness. I think of how complicated life was for, you know, people who have similar colors as me, right? That was kind of the foundation of history for us when we went to school, right?
Yeah.
Everything was about white versus black, slavery, what we went through, how hard it was, and your parents reinforced that, right? We've come a long way, things have changed, but there's still gonna be a certain level of struggle, even in the 80s, right? That we're possibly gonna have to go through, right? Their opportunities are not just, you know, out there like that for us. So it requires a significant amount of work, an above and beyond amount of work. And even still then, you may not have the opportunities that, you know, other people had. So I think of, that's what I think of right off the bat is struggle.
So let me stay there, because I want to unpack that, because that's extremely deep. So number one is, so you're an African American, like, you know, like, and correct me if I'm wrong, you can't trace back to an African country, so to speak.
Yeah.
So where does history, at least for you, and maybe today you're more enlightened, but growing up, where did your history trace to? I know what it felt, struggle, but like when you thought about like I'm from, where did that starting point begin for you?
It's confusing, I would say, because then you're introduced as black, and then there's this African American aspect of it, and it's like, yeah, well, I get it.
Yeah.
I have, you know, kind of African roots, I believe, because of the color of my skin. Is my assumption, right? But because I'm born in America, I'm an African American, so I think it's really kind of simple how that all came together. But in regards to being around people who are from, you know, Africa, I don't see a difference, right? I see our color, and I see us all being brothers and sisters, and sharing a common struggle at some point. Our ancestors at some point shared some sort of a common struggle. I'm not sure that specifically answers the question.
No, it does.
But
it
yeah,
does.
For me, I didn't really trace it back to anything.
Yeah.
Other than the fact that I got an idea that at some point, you know, somebody in my lineage, right, somewhere in my history, I have African roots, right? And that's always been, you know, what I thought about it.
I appreciate you sharing that. Here's why, Jay. So for me, I'm a Kenyan American, right? Similar to Zed, I was born here. So in my household was very much cultural Kenyan.
Sure.
But when I walked into the classroom, it was a drastic different experience. Like, and it was almost like, and so I felt the tensions both ways. Like, even though we were like, it sounds good, like we were brothers, we were always kind of, you know, African, like, you know what I'm saying?
When I go
like,
back home and you go back home, it's completely different.
Completely different.
Yeah.
And God forbid y'all meet my parents, then the jokes start coming, like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
I can definitely
the
relate to
accent.
that.
you know what I'm saying? Like, they say, oh. But this is the thing, though. There's something so enriched and so dope and about being able to know where you come from.
Yeah.
Like, when I go back to Kenya, and I see everybody that looks like me. The billboards look like me, right? I can trace back to my great-grandparents. Even though we were affected by colonialism, that identity part, man, it's important. So it's like, I always hope that, especially African Americans, that they would be curious to know, like, wait a minute, it's not just, I mean, look, America is you can claim it as your country, that's fine. But I'm pointing towards somewhere, which goes to, I guess, another question that I want to ask you guys. That, to me, came through a process of education. Like, I had to learn. Like, I didn't grow up thinking this way. My parents didn't necessarily, they didn't teach me about African-American history. Like, it was always like, what role does education play in helping us shape our worldview, right, in terms of our identity and our history and kind of knowing who we are when we talk about this African diaspora? And how has the system in itself helped us know who we are and where we are?
I think the education system does not help in identifying any type of culture. It doesn't help with creating a space where you can say, oh, I want to learn more, okay? Because the first thing they teach you is slavery. That's it. They don't teach you what happened before slavery. It's like, and as a matter of fact, they don't even teach you how we got here.
Yeah.
Like, were we ever good? Like, we were always
We were just
subpar.
That's what you think, right?
That's what you think. It's like it's slavery, and you wonder, well, I don't know. For me, you know, growing up, really is that how it started? But like you said, you go home and it's something completely different, right?
Yep.
You know, my mother was the one who was just like, you know, we all from Africa. My mother used to tell me that all the time. We're all from Africa. So that's been embedded in my brain for so long. I had to, like I said, educate myself and find out what was before slavery.
Yeah.
You know, because you hear about, you know, the British coming over here and colonizing, but you don't really, and then you hear about, they glorify the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. They glorify Columbus coming over here and discovering America, but they don't even talk about the Atlantic slave trade.
Oh yeah.
They don't talk about that. You have to figure that out on your own.
Yep.
And you have to have a hunger for that. And that's another thing that the education system fails in. They don't give us that hunger.
Yeah.
I think there's another aspect, because even when you talk about what happens before, so the history of Africans in America, or African Americans, is actually pretty rich, even when we talk about what happens after slavery. So after slavery, pre-Jim Crow, there's a very rich history of African Americans really going, great, we're going to start schools, we're going to enter government, we're going to do this, all of these advancements. Then the government goes, okay, we don't really like that too much. And then you get all these new rules that come in. So I think that the education system doesn't do a good job, because what it's essentially doing is, we know that the education system it's essentially structured to create patriots. It's structured to go, you know, now that I've learned the history of America, I love this country, and I'll do X, Y, Z.
Correct.
Which is why you would jump from slavery, Dr. King, Oprah, Obama.
And that's it.
Yeah,
And Obama's new.
Let me add something. You know, the role of education anywhere is to enlighten, all right? To bring light where there's darkness, to remove ignorance, right? That's what the role of education is. But going with the answers that all of us have given about our background, our history, and what we know, what we were taught, and what we've come to discover for ourselves, some of the themes, the keywords were confusion, complicated, what we know versus what is the reality. You know, there's a very big disconnect. And so in that case, we see the education system did not live up to its billing, all right? Instead of shedding light and enlightening, has brought more confusion. I grew up, I did my primary and secondary school, that's high school, you know, back in Kenya. And I knew more about what the white people did than what my own people did. I knew, you know, I could tell you who discovered Mount Kenya, who discovered the source of River Nile, what the Portuguese did when they came over and they built a fort, Vasco da Gama, and all the trade routes and everything. But just like Zeb has said, there's just so much rich history that was ignored, that was passed over as unnecessary or primitive, so to say. And so even coming over to this country, you know, you look at the education system. By the way, I went to a HBCU, right? Which I think was a blessing, was a major blessing. But then I look back at my experiences post-HBCU versus my colleagues who never went to HBCU, and I don't see any difference. You know, as you have pointed out very well, that the role of education system is to create patriots. And then when we see that happening, instead of us having that hunger to study more and find out the things which are hidden, there's so many other things which get our attention. I want to make a living. I want to live the dream. History is great. What they did is great, but I need to live a life. And at the end of the day, whatever I was supposed to be taught, my friends from non-HBCU schools and me, not much of a difference, and that's a tragedy.
Do you think that's just intentional, like from an education perspective, right? Or is it just coincidental that?
Mm.
I like to think positive about people, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, you do.
He said I don't. I don't.
So when I say it's intentional, you know, it will reveal, you know, this huge conspiracy, and you just some people there sitting down and trying to deny us our background. I would want to think that it is not intentional, but the statistics, the reality shows that I think there's someone somewhere saying that if these people know the truth of who they are and where they're from.
Ding, ding. Now we talking. Now we get into the nitty gritty.
In as much as I wouldn't want to believe that is intentional, I think it is.
I don't think it's
unfortunately.
all of it, but we live in a very systematic sort of society, right? So education, to a certain extent, has to be
A part of the system. It's part of the
It's
system.
like we want you to know
Certain
what
things.
you should know.
No.
right?
We want you to know what we want you to know.
Yeah, sure. And
That's
then
the premise.
When we're being loud about these new things that we're discovering or trying to jump over these walls or these boundaries that have never been jumped over before, that's why we all need to be loud, right? Because if we're
Correct.
loud enough, right, we can kind of break some of these traditions.
But so this is why I think it's intentional. Right now, there's a debate about just talking about critical race theory.
Yes.
And it's coming up with a lot of heat that this is not what needs to be taught in our schools.
Yeah.
What is the problem talking about the role of race playing in our history?
Because if we know the truth, we will deviate from the system.
And that's what, and look, and I know it's people hate they don't want to be like the kind of awkward ones or the weird ones. But remember President Barack Obama, he went and I think it was an international presentation, and he was talking about America's history as he was talking to the Muslim world.
Yes.
That even us, we have to we came saying we were missionaries going conquering people. We have a checkered past. When he came back, they were saying this guy is anti-American. He doesn't defend the country.
Yes.
So a lot of people try to play like dumb, or they try to play. But let me tell you something. Even with African parents, I did not learn until recently the wonderful history of Africa. I had no idea Socrates, Plato, all these guys went back to Africa
That's where they
to
got
get their pedigree, their philosophical. I just knew these guys as geniuses.
Yeah. Because that's
That's what I'm saying. Oh, these guys, every hero that I had growing up was the white man.
In defense of African parents, of which I am one now. I grew up saying, these African parents, until my own kids say, you African parent. Now, in defense of African parents, you have to ask yourself, what is the priority right now, right?
Of course.
Is it teaching, these kids Socrates and all that, or is it giving them a fair shot in life, right? And when it comes to giving them a fair shot in life, what do we think about? We think about money. But then in defense of, I'm here to defend the African parents, right? But that's a misguided,
But I'm not blaming.
mindset.
I'm not blaming.
Oh
I'm
yes,
not blaming
of
them.
course.
What I'm saying, it goes back to the system. The British colonized Kenya, right? They obviously they owned the education system. I went to, I forget what river it was, and I think it was the Thompson River or in Kenya.
Yeah.
And I go
The
there-
falls.
The falls.
Yeah.
Well, why is this called Thompson Falls?
Exactly.
Thompson came here and discovered it.
Yep.
There were people there.
Well, they didn't discover it.
I can't stand that whole discovery nonsense.
Columbus discovered America.
He did not.
But that's what we teach our
But
kids.
you see,
No. That's what the education system teaches children or taught us. I don't teach my children
And
that.
I
My
keep-
children know the truth.
I keep it real simple, right? Anybody could have wrote that book. Or things from way back then get changed and lost, from years. That stuff gets all changed and manipulated. I don't want to get into a whole conspiracy conversation, but history is a funny topic.
But
It's his story.
But here's the thing, though, it's critical because I'm telling you, you need to know what your identity is.
It is.
Oh, yeah.
I agree totally.
But how could you know where your identity is if everything is misleading? It's like that telephone game that you learn in school, right? You say something, by the time it gets to him, it's something else completely,
point.
right?
Yeah.
So if everybody tells the story their way, it's going to get muddled. Something is not
But
right.
that's why we write it down.
But you know what the thing is? Man, it's rough. Because
No, sure. Yeah.
it's a butterfly effect. Just the idea of not telling kids one thing leads to so many other issues down the line, primarily self-worth. If you have never seen people who look like you doing certain things, you don't even imagine you can do certain things. So if you never tell kids,
Thank you.
this is what people who look like you have done,
Correct.
it's the statistics show that if he or she's never seen it, the mind probably won't then kind of grasp that idea.
Not arguing the history
Yeah.
itself, and to your point, it's critical, but I guess what we're getting more to is the content of the history and how
What's
accurate it is,
disseminated.
But that matters,
how
though.
real it is.
No,
Jay,
no,
you-
I'm saying that's what I'm
Jay-
saying.
yeah.
It matters.
Jay made the comment when he thinks of his history, he thinks struggle. If Jay knew the impact,
That's what I'm saying.
if Jay knew what black people have contributed to the world, if Jay knew the amount of things that we invented and created that other people took as
Credit
credit
for.
for because we weren't allowed to have patents,
Yeah.
then all of a sudden your worldview of yourself changes.
And that's what I'm saying. That goes
You know,
back to self-worth. And
Joe, let me go back
everything.
to that point I was making earlier. When you look at the issue of priorities, sometimes we get it wrong. And of course, it's because of our education, what education has taught us, what is of much importance. I think part of the reason we have these conversations is to help us answer the questions of identity.
Yeah, sure.
Who are you? Who are you? I saw some of the shows that you had, and you know the trip you make back home, and you know the issue trying to reconnect. I think if all of us are able to send out this message that if you're looking at priorities, what should be at the top should be the issue of identity, being able to answer the question with clarity.
Yes.
Who are you?
Yes.
Once we're able to do that and teach our children to be able to answer that question, everything else will fall in line.
Thank you.
Whether you're out there making money, you can make money, but if you don't know who you are, you don't know your worth, you don't know
Of
you're
course,
still going to live an empty,
Yeah.
life. You can be in church all you want,
Yep.
right? If you do not know who you are,
Yeah.
your background is still going to get lost. And so I think one of the messages that I'd like to send out there is what's most critical, especially to African parents. Of myself, I'm one of them. In as much as we're teaching our children all these other things they need to succeed, the issue of identity, who are you, I think should be among the top things we teach them.
I agree.
Absolutely.
I agree.
I agree with that.
So let me do a quick segue, because honestly, I could sit here and talk about this all day. But I want to talk about the elephant in the room. And there's a reason why I got the dynamics of this group. Given all this history talk, there is tension between the African American community and the African community. I remember when Obama won the presidency, he ain't really, some people said that, he ain't really African American. I mean, his father was from Kenya, so I guess, first of all, does everyone here on this panel acknowledge that there is not the synergies that we need, and then B, what is the reason? Do we think, like, why is it there? Like, what's the reason behind it?
You want to start from?
No matter. It's open to everybody. It's open to everybody.
So I think, growing up, we know how the game was, and you saw the definite divide. I think that one of the probably main reasons for a divide, it all goes back to just not understanding who we all are. That it always goes back to just the knowledge base.
Yes.
Because if we've noticed, especially as time has progressed, as far as culture is being concerned, we've now seen a lot of African artists cross over to the American culture. We've seen films about African culture. We've seen films about African American culture. There are Africans playing African Americans playing Africans. That exchange of culture has built a certain bridge, which is going, oh, we're not really that different. And I think that what was happening before was there wasn't as much of an exchange of culture, and also there wasn't any sort of understanding.
Yeah.
One side sees the other side as being, oh, you guys don't do anything. Another side sees the other side as being, oh, you guys are just all dirty. We don't know what happens there. So it's like this constant clashing heads. But now when you look, people want to trace back their roots. People are film, television, media. I think the internet's played a large role in like giving people a chance to bridge that gap.
Yes. Correct.
Now you can go on YouTube and go, oh, people from Kenya or whatever dress like people in New York, and people from New York are listening to artists from Nigeria, and artists from Nigeria are making music with people from here. And you go, oh, whatever understanding we had before was a misunderstanding based on just a lack of just knowledge. And I think that gap is slowly being bridged, but I think the core ends up being communication and history and just knowledge based in
The
general.
media plays a huge role in that too. I remember as a kid, they always had that Feeding of America thing.
Oh,
And
that's the worst commercial.
I mean, that's how we saw Africans. That was the only image that we had of Africans. Big belly, malnourished, flies flying in their eyes, and so when you see that, and then the new kid is from Africa, it's like,
It's the only connection.
or you a Somalian. I remember people saying that all the time, you a Somalian. And I'm like, what does that even mean? But that's all you can identify with because that's all you were seeing. And I think that we go back to systematically, like that's the images that they want us to see.
Yes.
You have to continue to perpetuate the lie in order for them to believe it.
Yeah.
So you have to make black people think, and when you look at Africans, black, whatever, we're all in the same pool. The problem is we think that one thinks they're better than the other.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, and Caribbeans is the same way with Caribbean people. You know, there's this thing, Jamaicans have 15 jobs or whatever like that. You know, people have these stereotypes, these rumors that get passed along. But at the end of the day, if, like you said, if we all realize what we have in common is really more than not.
Yes.
And if we really unite, I'm telling you, we would be powerful.
Over billionaires in the world.
That's the nightmare scenario. I'm telling that's
I
the
mean,
nightmare
Malcolm X
scenario.
said that, right?
Yes, it is.
No,
it is.
not Malcolm X. I think it was actually J. Edgar Hoover who said the worst thing the black person could do is unify.
Yeah, I think it was Malcolm. But either way.
Honestly, somebody said
Somebody said it. Might have been Malcolm. Might have been. No,
but
when he started the FBI, I believe he said something to that, you know, to that effect, and
that's the truth.
It's
That's
the truth
yeah.
because if we had the history, right, and if we had something to attach that history to a culture, then we would be proud. You know, that's why Africans are deemed as being better, because when you ask an African where they're from, they don't say Africa. They say Kenya or Ghana or Ethiopia. When you ask an American where they're from, right? They say the hood, you know, Jersey City, New York, whatever, the South, wherever.
I wonder if, like, similar to like white American people or anybody outside of the African American race, right? There's a stereotype about African Americans.
Yeah.
And I wonder if African parents who come here to raise their families
If
here
they
also
That they do.
get that same picture about African Americans
Oh, yeah.
and don't quite understand
So there's
you know.
there's two ways to this.
Yeah.
I'm to what she said before.
Yeah.
The whole African booty scratcher playing on like monkeys climbing on trees. Everybody stink.
Yeah.
Like that's a real thing.
Yeah.
And it sounds fun and games and joking.
So it's both ways.
But those don't hurt, man. Like you know, when people talk about like your dad, like or my parents, right? And in my mind, like my parents work hard as hell.
Yeah.
Like you know what I'm saying, they deal with the same stereotypes from other non-black folks that you deal with at work. Like other like communities aren't looking at it like, oh, that's African, that's African. No, they're not looking at that. Y'all black.
when you get pulled over, I mean,
That's it. They're black or whatever.
we're all
On the
black.
flip side, though, I also remember what my parents would tell me about African Americans. That was a jaded, that the African Americans are lazy, they're criminals, right? Stay away from them. They're dangerous.
No different from what.
God forbid you had braids. Well, you're right. It's and God forbid they had braids, or God forbid they had any of that stuff. Whoa. And so I find myself, and again, my relationship with my parents have evolved. I checked them on this. But my parents would rather me hang out with like Asians or Filipinos.
You know, one of the, like I said, I came to HBCU for my in college, and I didn't know there was this disconnect, right? Yeah. Either I was too busy, you know, doing my education, doing my studies to notice that, or for whatever reason, I didn't know until someone said, hey, you know, they don't like us. And you know, the Caribbeans also don't like them, and they don't like us. And after someone said that, that's when I started, you know, looking at it that way.
Attention.
But then I think part of it has to be, okay, on my personal experience, I've never had that, you know, I can't be friends with so-and-so because of their background. What I know for sure is if we stop looking at it from African American and African disconnect to look at our own people back home in Kenya, Joe and Zeb, what the colonialists did very well was to divide the people.
Yep.
When he came in, divided people along tribal lines.
Yep.
And if there was a place where the tribe was so big and they have so much land, they put artificial political boundaries. So we have people, the same community, same culture, same everything, but they're living in different countries. Yeah. And now they can't even go to see each other without a visa or without special papers. We see that kind of, and now coming back to your question, the education system being the way it is, was it intentional or not?
Absolutely.
It's intentional because even this divide and conquer thing is very, very much intentional. And we have to go back and ask ourselves, how much of those stereotypes is actually true?
Yeah.
Okay, how much of that is actually true? Yeah. And if we can see some of it being true, we ask the question, why? I've heard that explanation, you know, the African American is lazy, they don't take advantage of situation, they don't do, that's fine. You know, you can say that based on what you're looking at. But I also come from a mental health background. Have you taken time to understand the effect of this systemic racism, the trauma that it has caused all these years. Have you taken time to just think about that? And if you haven't, then you really do not have much authority to talk about the little thing that you're seeing without considering so much that's, this is just the tip of the iceberg.
And I won't make an excuse for African Americans or African American families, right? But for some African families who come into the country, that's the very beginning, right? Of a tradition of establishing a tradition for your families that should last for years to come, right? This is generations of African American families, not making an excuse for it, where these kids are born into these families and don't even have a chance the moment they're brought into this world, just because of the dynamic they're in, the level of poverty that they're in. I'm not saying you can't get out of it, right? And it's easier to say some people can versus some can't, but there are literally people, not just African Americans, but tons of people, but we're specifically talking about African Americans in America that are born into these families and won't have a chance just because of the environment that they're born into. And it's not for everybody, right? But I think it has a little bit to do with it too. I can argue against the lazy piece, right? But it's not for everybody.
Let's talk about the lazy piece, because I think when you do enough reading, even that criticism becomes very unfair.
It is.
Because of the fact that throughout the history of this country, African Americans have actually fought for a number of rights which the immigrants who are black who are coming in are benefiting from. So it's interesting because the group that you're calling lazy, the benefits which you're receiving in this country, that's the group that fought for it. So it's a very funny dynamic. But if you've never really taken the time to really understand, and if the education is not going to do it, it becomes very weird. So then you have a group which is essentially going, you guys are lazy, but you're at this school, at this place, and you're in integrated classrooms because of something that this group, which you are for some reason calling lazy, they fought very hard for.
I think after working in a field from dusk till dawn for 400 years would award a black person to be a little lazy. Okay? Because the white people could not. They could not do what the black man and woman could do. Okay? And I'm not just talking about picking cotton in the field from dusk till dawn. I'm talking about inventing things like we talked about earlier. And just imagine, having to teach yourself to read. Okay? Having to teach yourself to do a plethora of things. And then as generations went on, and you're forced to continue to educate yourself. Why? Because schools were burned down. Okay, you're not able to, even when schools were integrated, there was so many odds stacked against us, and you have the nerve to call us lazy. It makes no sense to me. I identify with that because I am, as you guys have mentioned, first generation American. So yes, I was born here. So I hear some of those things and black Americans are lazy. And it blows my mind.
It almost makes it, based on everything you're saying, is it lazy or is it tired?
Tired.
You know what I mean? Like it's really honestly, like if we really want to.
This is
like
a human
you ask
experience.
those questions, is it worth the fight?
No, man. It's a human experience. Are you saying you're not going to find lazy African immigrants? They're there. Are you saying you're not going to find people who have done all those things that we call vices? I mean, this is a common human experience. We all go through it. But then, just piggyback on what Zeb has said, last year, with the after the Floyd killing, and there was just so much agitation about there was just a common consciousness about what's going on, right? So I decided to bring someone to our church to just talk about some of these things. Because what I see a disconnect, but the disconnect that I see is generational, right? So we have the young folks who were born here, like you guys, right? And we have their parents who came over here, right? We are worshiping in the same church. But their experience, even their expression of their Christianity is a little different, right? And going back, what was considered, well, back then in Kenya, right? What were considered civilized was to become more like the white man, right? So you're more civilized, you're wearing good clothes, and even the way you talk changes. The way you worship also changes. And I don't know whether you guys have seen that, but our worship ethnic churches is more Eurocentric than it is Afrocentric, right? So we had to bring someone, let's talk about this. For so many people, it was a whole new world that was being opened to them, right? And then he spoke something about African privilege, right? So there's the white privilege, there's the female privilege. Then he spoke about African privilege. And that's what Zeb, you're talking about, that some of these things we're enjoying, some of these good things that we are happy for, is because our African American brothers fought for them. And here we are, just pointing fingers, quietly enjoying them. Can't even go to protest.
Loudly enjoying them. Loudly enjoying them.
Loudly enjoying them.
So let me ask you a question. How did the African community respond? Because you brought up George Floyd.
Right.
Zeb and I, and even you, as first generations, that we felt every part. It broke us.
Yeah.
What was the African community who more so migrated, may not be as in touch? How did that impact them? The marching and the protesting.
I think it was more. It was a mixed bag of goods, right? There are many who are woke, for good reason, and they felt sympathetic, and they felt, this is actually something we need to get involved in. But then, kids don't go out too much, right? Coronavirus pandemic is still around, so you can protest online, but don't go outside. There was a mixed bag of goods, and there were those who were like, well, this is life, this is what happens. And the others were saying, Jesus is coming again. So,
I feel like that's the cop out answer every time. So, Jesus is coming again.
These are the signs of the times.
Signs of the times.
Man,
Yes.
cut that.
It was definitely an interesting time. I mean, there's still a small level of fear to this day, and we're so far removed from that incident. And that was around the time where I was out, running a lot too, and doing tons of different type of thing. And I'm like, well, we're in a position right now where it could be my day if police officers just kind of having a bad day.
We've accepted it almost.
Yeah.
we accept that's the nature of the world.
I have no idea when I could just be driving home, driving through Cranford, Westfield, New Jersey, bringing my daughter home from school, and a police officer just could be having a bad day, and then I'm just the victim to that.
Oh yeah,
right?
because that's the thing. He could just be having a bad day.
That's it.
But when we have a bad day, we're expected to still perform.
And we
we're
have a lot of-
expected
No,
to still.
you're not allowed to have a bad day.
Oh yes, you're right. You're right. There you go.
Absolutely.
We're not allowed to have a bad day.
So let me ask this then.
Bad day is the excuse.
Well,
a real reason for police officers or anybody to act.
On it, right?
Sorry, Buka.
No, you're good. So how do we fix this? Because I still, and maybe it's the optimism in me and the dream in me, but part of me still feels that we can unite as a people, right? And as we start becoming more conscious, as we start becoming more woke, and we start learning more about our history, right? That's why I do this Birthright Africa trip. I'm trying to get as many African Americans to Africa just to see, first of all, the civilization over there. There's, I think 6 out of the top 10 fastest growing economies in the world are in Africa. You won't hear that anywhere else. But I guess, how do we fix that? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like what do we do?
We have to start the conversation. Platforms like this.
Like this, yes.
We need to have more of them, but you know what else we need to do? We need to invite white people. We need to invite Hispanics. And because we need to let them know, okay, we know what's going on. And even more so, we need to sit down and really realize amongst ourselves, right? Because we need to start addressing the issue here first, right? With the first generations, with the, born in Africa, raised here, we need to sit down and really put our cards on the table. Because I notice here that, you identify more so 50-50 because half of your life you were raised here. I was born and raised here, and I still don't identify as American. So there's the conundrum in that, right? But if we really sat down and had these conversations, talked about our issues collectively, and then talked about solutions to these issues, then we can really unite. You can't just have a problem and keep talking about the problem without talking about how to resolve the problem.
Correct. I love that.
I think we're seeing the protesting, right? But I think that's, from an imagery standpoint, it's nice to see, but I think the majority of people are still scared, right? And I haven't protested not one time, and not because I didn't have the time for it, but my thing is, if I stay out of the way and don't get in trouble, I'll be fine,
Yeah.
right? And I think there's a lot of people who are not hopeful that there is something positive around the corner. Like we could be out there protesting and there's actually going to be some real change. I'm not saying I feel that way, but I think there's a majority of people who don't really feel that regardless of how hard we fight or how hard we yell or scream, that we're not really going to see that real change. And I think it's giving people that real hope.
But Jay,
that we can.
even the economics behind unifying, like that, there's about $1.3 trillion of buying power in a black community. The dollars never stay in our community. It leaves. Other communities, it could stay 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks. Forget even like whether you hate me or not. It's beneficial for both of us, African American. Can you imagine, we talk about the African Union in Africa. When you start breaking down those barriers and people start sharing resources and trading amongst each other.
It's amazing.
And not let, other countries who, by the way, silently, there's a second round of colonialization happening if we're not careful.
Economically.
Of course. People are, China, those guys are investing in Africa right now as we speak. And I'm just wondering, imagine black people like unified and we invested in Africa, we invested here, and we took ownership of the things that we built. You know what I mean?
It's, you made a very valid point when you said, just pooling everything together. That's a collective.
Yeah.
We need to build a collective, right? So let's say, okay, I write well, right? You might be good in math, so you're good at, looking at stocks and stuff like that. You're handy, right? So you can paint, you can build the house, whatever, right? Your transportation, you drive people around, whatever your thing is that you do, we all need to come together and we need to take our resources and put them all together. We need to cultivate.
Yeah.
We need to build generational wealth, but we need to build it for us.
Correct.
And not for the other people, okay?
Correct.
And that's a part of the problem. We're so jaded, right?
Yeah.
Our focus is like the horse, right? We have the blinders on. We're so focused on what's in front of us, and we're so focused on building for us, and that's why we fail.
Correct.
It's also, Western culture, American culture generally is very individualistic. So there's also that grind of like, okay, African culture or Caribbean culture might be more familial. So it's like the community culture actually may be much more easily accessible with other cultural frameworks.
Correct.
This specific cultural framework, capitalism, I have to do what I have to do.
Go to the top,
focus.
at the expense of others.
If I get 100, somebody has to get a 99. You know what I mean? In some schools, you get ranked.
Good
You know what I
point.
mean? So like that I think there's like a mental hurdle that has to be kind of gone over before you get to the Let's Unify, because
I like that.
from pre-K up until you graduate college in the American system, you're taught you do what you got to do, because if you don't, then he's going to get what you were supposed to get.
But we need to
So now you're
change
telling
that.
somebody after that whole time, after he or she turns 23,
Unify.
24, you should unify. You're like, bro, it's been 25 years of you telling me that I got to do what I got to do. Now you're telling me I have to unify. And and I think that the mental framework has to be worked through, and then you can get to, okay, cool. Now let's see how we can
We
talk
need a
on the
new
same
curriculum.
page.
That's what it's
That's
all
what-
about.
No,
I
talk
think
about that.
What
We
we
need
just
to
needs to be
do.
changed a little bit.
Yeah.
Do your best.
No,
but you
forget
don't
a new
need to
curriculum.
be
We need
better
to build
than
our own
everybody.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, let me add and say that, we spoke about the intentional nature of the miseducation system, the intentional nature of divide and conquer. We also need to be intentional. All the things that we've spoken about need to be intentional. I like the fact about relearning how we have community. In as much as our cultures in Africa are collectivist and we're supposed to be, family oriented, all that, still there's that competition. My family gotta be the best. Where does your kid go to school?
Yeah.
Well, mine, on the other
Yep.
hand. So there's still that competition, and
Imagery.
with the competition, there's envy, there's jealousy, there's everybody just trying to pull everybody down. There's this accusation that Africans don't support African businesses, we don't patronize our own businesses.
Yep.
We look at other communities, the Asians, the Chinese, all they do, they patronize their businesses. So if we start by relearning the need for unity, relearning the need that if you go up, that's good. I'm gonna go up
We need to go up
sometime
together.
too.
Together. And there's enough room.
But
Yes,
it's
there's
okay.
enough room.
That's
One
the
of the
big one.
things
There's
we-
enough room.
Yeah.
One of the things we need to do is, okay, first of all, if you accelerate You have to bring the people up with you.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's something that we need to absolutely work on, right? But we also need to work on helping that particular person to accelerate.
Correct.
So if I'm going like this, right, in order for you to climb this wall, okay, and we're pushing and we're helping you get over the wall. Once you get over the wall, extend your hand and pull me up, and then I can extend the
What
first
happens
person.
is once I get over the wall, I move out of that neighborhood, take my kids to a different school.
But this is
I know I don't need nothing
this is
from
the
everybody.
brainwashing that we
Yeah.
have to disengage
So
from.
understood.
mental
Understood.
framework that has
Yes.
to be completely worked
So
through.
here's the thing.
Absolutely.
Here's the thing, guys. Like, look, the truth is, I literally can talk about this all day because it goes deep. I want to ask everybody just in one word, yes or no. In our lifetime, do you think black people will unite across the world?
Is this a, you really want us to answer this question?
Yes or no?
To be honest with you, I'll say no.
Absolutely not.
No. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah.
No.
Across the world, no.
What about Africa?
No, no way. I think there's more hope over here than Africa. I think we're still, man, we have Anglophone countries and Francophone countries just to begin with.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a big work.
That's fine. Look, I want to thank y'all for being on this conversation. This is again very different than all the other ones. It runs deep, and I think this is a conflict. To your point, Erika, this is something that we need to keep talking about.
Absolutely.
I do see a world where African Americans know who they are, and they can, even if they can't trace to a country, they know there's a place where they're not just tolerated, they're celebrated.
Bro,
You
even
didn't
Africans.
answer the question. Now.
Even
I would like to.
Africans.
He did not.
I
he
think-
skipped over it very
Yeah, you skipped over yourself, so I'm
the
just
host, right?
wondering.
My show.
He thinks so.
That was. I think so. I think there is.
In your lifetime?
In my lifetime, it's possible. And you know what it
gonna
is?
live in 300
it's
years?
because no. It's because hold on a second, guys. It's because people like Zeb. It's because people like myself. When I look at the young people in Africa, they're not tolerating the whole perception bull crap.
Yeah.
They want a relationship with African Americans.
So far, that is until they grow older and then they become more
But we
of their
can,
mindset.
but
it can be changed.
That's what I'm
It
saying.
can
If
be
the
changed,
handoff's right,
Yeah.
with things like social media,
Exactly.
with things like technology, I'm no longer limited to what you tell me, Dad. You told me Stayson was a thug. Well, I'm looking at Stayson and I follow him, and he actually does pretty cool things. I got to know him, so I think technology is going to help accelerate that. Again, is it dreamy a little bit? Possibly. I'm going to dedicate my life to doing everything I can to help it, because I know what African Americans did for me. I would not be here today without them. And so whether it's helping my people economically, whether it's helping my people, that's why I do this foundation. I give scholarships to kids here in the hood, because it was this institution that took care of me, that took me in. It's why I take the kids here to Africa, because I want them to learn. Now, do I negate Africa? Absolutely not. I pour resources there, but it starts here for me. So with that being said,
I respect that.
I'm glad you guys being here, and I'd love to get you back on soon.
Yes, absolutely.
Thanks,
There has to be a part two,
Two, right?
3, 4.
African diaspora.
Yeah, we need to continue to have these conversations, so that, because the fact that you're so optimistic, it makes me feel like I should be optimistic, and that's a start.
Yeah.
You know, because if you are saying this is why I do this, and I'm like, well, what can I do to help perpetuate your truth?
Amen. Amen.
And I think, Joe, I speak for all of us here, man. We truly respect the work you do, man. That foundation and
Yes.
whatever you do, just little contribution. If it changes one life, changes one family, changes one community, that's all there is.
Then you did something.
It was
Yeah.
Thank
worth
you so
it.
much for
Thank
what
you
you're
guys. Thank you guys.
Yeah, for sure.
Appreciate you.